Welcome to everybody who's listening to the podcast. My name is Hans Peter Meyer, the Reverend Hans Peter Meyer. I'm trying to be reverential in what I do. And today's guest is Leroy Gordon. His title is Flash Gordon, because at one time, maybe still, he's quite a...
I'm actually returning to the ring in October. Got something to get ready for.
Cool. Well, I definitely want to watch you. So it's been a long time since I watched wrestling. Like when I was a kid, Saturday, we only had one channel. Saturday night was hockey night. First it was like cartoons and then hockey. And then when the hockey season was over, it was cartoons and then wrestling.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
So anyway, I look forward to that, Leroy. And today we're going to be talking, this is the fourth in our series of conversations about the four archetypes for men's work. We've talked about the lover, the magician, the warrior, and today we'll be talking about the king. But just before we went live here, I was talking to Leroy about something that's been troubling me. So just to recap, you may have seen, and so on social media or elsewhere, the results or some of the survey work that was done of women. The question was, would you rather meet a bear in the woods or a man in the woods? And a significant majority of women, 7 out of 10 surveyed, said they'd rather meet a bear. Now, I'm not surprised by that. Makes sense to me from the conversations I have with women and just generally how women grow up being wary of our energy. But what's, I guess, distressing for me or troubling is just how many men, when they see that or they see a question around it, turn it into, well, I'm not that kind of man, or my friends aren't those kind of men, instead of this is how your sister, your mother, your best friend or colleague who's a woman, your granddaughter is experiencing the world. Not every woman, but a significant number of them are experiencing, and that's sobering shit. And it's not about you as an individual, it's about this culture.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I've just been getting some pushback on some of the things that I posted around this, and I'm just kind of feeling
Interesting. You've been getting pushback. That's wild. I think though, as I do it, and maybe you have been maybe you have in the past, but it feels so natural for us to go into defense mode when we are given feedback of this nature. And I think that if we just look at the general public with people who are maybe doing less of this work or maybe not at all, really kind of hip to men's work and stuff, that, we're healing a lot of this, that they are more likely going to be in that defensive mode. And what instead I think is, of course, listening, receiving their experience. And I know for, when I'm defensive, a lot of times I don't fully understand why this opinion or whatever was tossed at me. And the first thing isn't to understand it more, but it's to defend myself. And I think that we as men, again, the practice is to work on responding as opposed to reacting, because in that reactiveness, it often only gets worse. And right now, guys are looking real bad for some of the stuff that I've seen in response. Just threatening to like more threatening to women. And it's just like, yo, are you even looking at how you responded to this? Because that's a 7 out of 10. And if you ask me, and more, women may not have, be as conscious around the harms that they have experienced at the hands of men, whether, very overt or less overt, and more experience with how, gentle and peaceful bears actually are if you're not messing with them. I wouldn't be surprised if 9 out of 10, I wouldn't be surprised at 9 out of 10 having that opinion, especially with seeing some of the responses that we're seeing. So it is troubling, definitely troubling.
So, I mean, our this is how I look at some of this stuff is my defensiveness is some of that's built in. It's how I am as, and it's a in some ways it's a really good thing. You attack my family, I'm going to defend my family. You impugn my capacity to do stuff, I'm going to be there. It's the discernment. It's like instead of it being so like you said reactive, like how. And yeah, this is the practice. It's like whether you're doing men's work or whether you're doing meditation or some kind of yoga or some kind of discipline. And I've never experienced military training, and I'm curious about that because um, there's you're basically made into a weapon. So is there training on like putting the safety on, on yourself?
Mm.
Like, I mean, this is I guess what I see men's work, a lot of it's about is feeling more, but not reacting more. Like feeling
Mhm.
more and being able to hold it in myself. And then,
Absolutely.
it was one of them. I ended up in, so John Wineland's been a teacher that I've learned a lot from. And my first workshop I went to was a weekend intensive, and he had us men together. And he was pretty clear right from, this is not like the art of the pickup. Like, this is not, although all the stuff that we learn is like that's the stuff, right? But he
Mm.
said this is about actually taking responsibility for who we are as men and making the world safer for the feminine, whether that's in me or in somebody else. And then when I listened to that, it was like, whoa, this is really cool. Like, yeah, I want to learn how to have this thing called sacred sex, and I want to learn this stuff. But it actually begins with me being able to feel more and hold that and not react, not freak out, not immediately move forward, not anyway. Yeah, I just anyway, it's good to talk to you. I remember something you
Yeah.
said in one of our previous conversations about the work is actually receiving the feminine. Everything else we do is preparation. The actual work is to receive, however you define that,
Yeah.
and um, and that just really came home for me here in this stuff. So
Absolutely, man. And I think I see that the idea of receiving the feminine very clearly in this example. They have feedback for
mm,
us.
yeah,
We got to receive it. That is a request for more safety. And often the request is sometimes just to be heard, the request just to be seen, um, the request to be with them and not freak the fuck out or
yeah,
reject whatever they have to say. And I feel like defensiveness is an example of a rejection of what they have to say. And I also think about how with us, like, and I think of defensiveness kind of belonging with the warrior, and there is a place for it.
mhm,
But often we're not, we go to defend ourselves in that moment, but there's something that she's asking for from us that, like, in a way we're kind of defending her from ourselves in the way that we are not showing up. And I think that there's a need for that in knowing that, hey, we can be the use bad guy for lack of a better term. We could be the bad guy too. And maybe she's telling us about when we're the bad guy, or telling us around there's bad guys around, and yeah, you're still responsible for taking care of that bad guy. Yeah, I think it's a big conversation, and I definitely just wish for more receptiveness for my brothers out there.
yeah. And yeah, it could. I've got things like I'm thinking of where this conversation could go, but let's
Yeah.
I'm going to take a big breath here
Reel it in.
and bring us to this conversation about the king as an archetype. And most of the time when we've talked about these kind of archetypes, I've asked you for a practice, and I think this time I'm not sure if I did or not, and I'm remiss if I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you've got something you
Yeah.
want to finish or start with it, that would be great.
Yeah. I don't really have like a practice in terms of like a drop in, drop out, whatevs, but the exercise that we use, and maybe you've done this before in some other place, called the King's Chair. And in the King's Chair, you are sitting with your counsel, and if we're talking about king archetype, maybe we can get into the archetype itself. But I think number one piece of that is to have a council of kings around you, so
Mm,
really men who you respect, you trust, maybe they're doing work with you, you know, um, something along those lines. But keeping counsel, and with that counsel, you receive feedback. You ask for feedback, and it's very simple feedback. Um, they say, "I see you as a king because." They say, "I don't see you as a king because," and you are there in the king's chair, just naming the hot seat, the king's chair, but it's your throne where you're receiving how you are showing up, essentially. And I think we play around with that a little bit. It's hard to do the "I don't see you as king" part when we don't know each other as well as I would as a man that I see weekly. But there's plenty I can tell you about
okay,
reasons I see you as a king. So we can perhaps share a few of those affirmations, and maybe go there towards the end after we talk about the archetype more generally first.
super.
Sweet.
Sounds good. Okay, tell me more. Tell me how you use tell me about the archetype,
Yeah.
and then how it plays out in your work.
Yeah, so king archetype is, I like to think of it as like where like it's like above the other three in terms of like they are kind of funneling into the king. And if you are, showing up in their more balanced expressions, most balanced expressions, that you are well on your way to kingliness. And I then think the king archetype has its own facets. um but king archetype, it is the head of the lover, of the warrior, of the magician. It's you. The king is balanced. The king is fair. He is in integrity. The king cares about the world around him, the community, his realm, if you will. The king blesses younger men, lets them know that they got this. This is how I like to think of it. He's decisive, well studied, um, enjoys life. Little pieces of the other archetypes there. And I just kind of, in terms of the work, when I'm thinking about showing up, and I ask myself, am I being a king in this moment, or am I just simply not being the king? Am I not showing up like that? It just really helps guide me in how I want to move in the world. And I see when I'm kind of deficient in an area. Another thing that he's clear. That's one of my greatest challenges for being like, when I really not seeing myself as a king, is when I am having trouble being decisive or seeing a picture clearly. But when I am really in alignment, performing how I know I can, showing up how I know I can, that charges me up. And when I'm not there, it's like, okay, what direction is the work in today, this week, this month, whatever, and just working towards it. Um, yeah, it's how I feel when I am most balanced, and really looking at each of those areas, looking at each of the archetypes, and the facets that move us to balance in those archetypes, and just seeing when one needs to be looked at or multiple needs to be looked at, and just keep doing the work in those areas. And I'd say within my men's group, maybe do King's Share once, twice a year, something along those lines. And they're really like impactful times to get um, feedback from the guys that you're with each week, pretty much. See how they see you growing or not growing, and you come out of that with direction. And I trust myself and playing around and doing the work and knowing what it is I want to be working on. But when you have the eyes of men outside of yourself, uh seeing what you can't see or won't see or hope they don't see, but they do.
Mhm.
Oh man, how helpful is that to your growth? And it's been maybe, I wouldn't say everything, but it's been a large piece of mine. Just being
Mhm.
able to, and we say that with a lot of group processes, but this one, we put some weight behind that statement of being a king, showing up as a king. So it's one of my favorites.
Wow, that sounds like an interesting place to be in the
Mhm.
king's chair.
Yeah.
So, so your council would be your regular men's group, but the men that
Yeah.
are in it. There are lots of men, and I would imagine lots of men listening to this who don't have that ready-made counsel because they're not in a
Mm.
group. Um, I think I feel really lucky that I have over years cultivated relationships with men whom I trust. Um, but I had a friend. One of these men said to me a while ago. I was talking about a friend who has moved to a different community and is really needing the company of other men because he's in the hot seat. You know, basically he's got young kids and his career is in rapid growth, and after having kids, this relation marriage kind of stuff, and so I was encouraging him just some ideas about how to disconnect with some men, and my wise friend said, he needs to connect with you because most men are not going to give him good advice. Most of us are not trustworthy. We might be good guys, but we just don't have it. So, any advice on how we create a council if we aren't
Mm.
in a group? Any thoughts on that?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's
And I don't expect you like to have the answer, but I
yeah,
think it is a big question for us because a lot of guys just don't aren't drawn to the whole idea of men's group. They have a lot of resistance to it.
totally.
But the idea of having like a man they can trust or a couple of friends they can trust, that's that maybe it's easier. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think it is easier. I think that it's so tough though. I think it's so tough. I think we've got a lot of immaturity within ourselves, but around us also. And, right now, I feel like finding a man who I'd, just inherently walk up to and be like, "Oh, you're doing some great stuff. I respect that. Like, I think we can build on this." Like, that's definitely more than a stone's throw away. It doesn't feel like they're within a stone's throw anyway, and it's tough. So I definitely acknowledge that toughness. And I don't know how you got started in the work, but for me, it was just kind of like I read No More Mr. Nice Guy and took a chance. That's it. And I don't expect most people to do that to happen to a men's group. In terms of like kind of using what you got around you, I think that we have to, there will be some level of courage if you have men around you and you have a level of consciousness and hey, I want to get into this work, or hey, I just want to trust more, or hey, I just want to have deeper conversations about real stuff and not just shoot the shit. I actually have something on my heart and I want to tell them that. And you feel like you can't trust them, you may have to take that leap and find it out for real. Because I think a lot more guys feel that way than we think, and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean they're capable of receiving necessarily or capable of sharing big, but you will be surprised. And if you got nothing else, I think that's going to be the first place to go. Who's already in your life that you can actually deepen your relationship with?
Mhm.
I've been in my group for it's going on 4 years. And just like this year, I started thinking like, I have one really great friend from high school and a few others that are pretty close. But my best friend from high school, I'm just one day I was just like, why don't I talk to him more like I talk to the guys in men's group?
Mhm.
Is it like doubting his capability? And I've tried and it's not always been perfectly received, but pretty good. And every time I try, it gets better and better and better. And I don't think it's necessarily because of me, but just because of us and what we're trying to build. So that said, like challenge yourself to try this with guys who are already in your life and not king share, but talking about something more deeply in the first place, and building trust through that. Outside of that, I'd go to any other ideas that we typically have to build community, like what are you interested in, and go do that in person and see who's there
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's going to be more than you think, right? There
Yeah.
or more opportunity for connection than you think, and a lot of
Mhm.
folks are joining for the activity, but they're also joining for the connection that happens through the activity, as what I've
Yeah.
seen anyway. Mm.
Yeah. No, I think we're hungry. Our
Yeah.
hearts are hungry for that. I don't think it's new. I think it's just, it used to be easier. It used to be easier for most people, but there were always people who couldn't fit into the church group or the, whatever thing was happening. Um, I, I, um, I likened my early days of trying to connect with men as a dating process, and
Mhm.
all the shit that we were scared of in dating women. It's maybe even worse with men because that just seems like so weird. Like, why would I be dating men? But it is taking the risk, it's opening a little bit,
Mhm.
and I guess one of the guys I really trust now, it's hilarious because when I first met him, I thought he was an asshole, like,
Mhm.
in fact, he was such an asshole that I had no time for him for a long time. and
Yeah.
now and now he's like one of the guys that he's solid,
Yeah.
anyway.
Can I ask, like, as I find myself having this challenge, right? In my head, I'm thinking if I don't want to be like you in some way, I don't know if that's the relationship for me, or if you are a way that I actively just was like, I don't want more of that in my life. I don't want to be like that. I don't know that
Mhm.
I'm seeking that relationship. Like if I'm gonna like pursue that relationship, and I guess it's kind of like if I was dating, right?
Yeah.
When I think about what I respect in other men, it's like men who are going for it like I'm going for it, who are ways that I hope to be and will help me deepen that within myself, just being in that energy. Um, Maybe achieve something that I want to achieve, and not necessarily going to learn from them, but just like being in that energy, being in that way of being. And I believe the top five like thing, your top five people in your life, are very representative of your energy and whatnot. And I don't know if there's some more negative qualities. Like I don't know if I'm seeking that relationship out on a depth level. Now, someone who is out here to help men, like a little bit different, right? I was certainly, engage in those relationships, but it's going to be a little bit different than what's my inner circle looks like. Yeah, I don't know, playing around with that idea. What do you think?
Well, and you might not be saying this, but it just comes up. This is the thing that I'm seeing a lot of right now is uh, and again, I'm not saying you're saying this, but it's like that person is toxic to me, so I'm going to not engage with them. I'm going to cut them out. Now, I'm thinking, so one of my best friends is somebody who I'm regularly irritated and frustrated with. And he's one of my good guys. He's one of my counsel, right? Almost every time there's something that's irritating about him, it's like, oh, that was me not so long ago. Maybe it's still
Mhm.
me.
Hmm.
So I am, and this other guy who I said, was an asshole. And if I would have written him off, and I tried to, but he was part of a larger circle. But as I got to know him, so most of us, men and women, we're not throwing our arms open saying, "Here I am. Here's beautiful me. I want to know beautiful you." It's more like, I want to see how beautiful you are before I show you any of my beauty.
Mm.
Um, that's only to say, just be patient. I need to be patient. The stuff, the relationships. So my counsel, as it were, has been made up over time. I mean, I had one guy who I really wanted to be part of that close thing, and he basically said to me, "I already have a bunch of close relationships. I don't have." He was prepared to be like a friendly acquaintance, but he just wasn't into like a marriage with me because he was already so busy with other relationships.
Yeah.
And at first I felt rejected about that, and then I was like, what the fuck, like I want this guy in my life. So I didn't pester him, but he just kept being there, and I just kept being open, and now he's one of, he's the guy who I look at as probably the wisest guy on my council.
Yeah.
I'm probably his closest friend now, and it's how I look at all of my relationships. It's like everybody is bringing me something. What do I do with that? To go back to your thing
Yeah.
about like you're receiving, they're feminine, like, uh, am I like, what's stopping me from, like, with this one guy who said he was too busy, basically. Yeah, I felt some rejection. I could have closed down. I could have badmouthed him. I could have, what a jerk, what an asshole. I had those feelings,
Mm.
but I knew there was something there that I wanted, and so I just stayed present.
Yeah.
With a guy who I thought was a complete asshole and I didn't want anything to do with. He just was around, and eventually, over time, I got to appreciate that there was, that he was protecting himself. He was doing what I do. We had a conversation the other day. I was listening to him talk about this fight he had with his wife, and as he was telling me the story, I knew exactly, like, I would have reacted the same way his wife did. I didn't tell him that, but I made some jokes about it. And then the next day, he said, he did the right thing, which was basically apologized, and I just said, yeah, like my default position is asshole. Um, I need to be careful that I don't flip there. And so I say to guys that I'm working with, when you're going out looking, dating friends, men friends, is like, don't be put off by somebody being an asshole. Like, we're
Yeah.
all we're all protected. We're so we're so lots of us are carrying a lot of pain, and we don't know what to do with it. So we just protect
Yeah.
ourselves.
You're right. You're right. That's awesome. I
So that's my response, a long response to what you said there. Like I mean, there are definitely people who I don't feel like showing, guys who I don't really feel like spending time with, and some of it's just like I just don't have enough energy right now.
yeah.
Um, but trying to remember that something brought us together, and that probably at some point that will circle around again, and
Yeah.
then see what happens. I don't know.
Absolutely. It sounds like a matter of, and I also default to asshole too, by the way. And definitely, and it's, yeah, we've all going through pain, don't know what to do with it. And yeah, there's a lot of asshole behind that, and I feel like behind that asshole, or like effectively what that asshole does is like it moves us into closed heartedness and safety and etc. Right. And um
and loneliness and isolation and
Yeah.
suicide and heart disease.
First off, close-heartedness and safety, and then all the other things as we just stay like this
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I get that. And I think in standing for this work, it's like, all right, I be really cognizant of my ability to go asshole. And even if it's in response to somebody else's, because it's still it is the same. It is disconnection. And it is me with having less friends and less people in my council. Which yeah, that's something to soldier on through. Just stay open. Yeah. It's a practice of openness on all sides, I feel like.
So here's something else that I found. Like we're just talking about the council and friendships and having men with some kind of depth around us rather than the king per se. Although I think it might all be of a piece.
Yeah.
Um, I have really benefited from having older men in my on my council. You know, um, and I'm at an age now where I see some of these older men, their peers, dying. Right. Uh, I know that some of these older guys have benefited from me being in their lives. So several years ago, I have a wide range of ages in my life, and some of the guys who are in my life have come into my life because of women I've known. So again, it's lots of time women are the connectors. So in fact, I have a bunch of I have a woman friend who several of her exes are now friends of mine. Like I consider them to be on the edges of this council or whatever. But I'm always thinking about like I need that. I want to serve younger men, and I need their energy, and I want to be surrounded by a wide range of ages, because whatever wisdom we have, it flows back and forth, and wisdom and other kinds of support, like so for the one guy who is probably getting close to the end of his life, I provide a lot of help in the garden, and if there's a fence post hole to be dug, or then I'm available for a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that I'm going to be calling on some of these younger guys to be helping me with some things, not necessarily with the kind of spiritual work of being a man, but just the physical work of being a man.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of and that so to go back to your point about like finding things you're interested in, and the people who are there are potentially your could be your friends, could be members of your council. It's in doing that work, it's in working on the garden, or working on a building project, or working on my boat. These are kind of things where we start to trust each other.
Yeah.
you know the guy who I always thought of as an asshole, he was part of my dance community. you know the things that we do together end up being like places where we get to see different aspects of ourselves, each other.
Yes.
And I think that this, again, I don't know what you're going to say about the king archetype, but I think, you know, King Arthur. I don't remember the story, but he didn't just randomly, or maybe he did. I guess I'm more familiar with Robin Hood. How did Robin Hood put together the merry men? I mean,
Hmm.
the story that I remember was him and Little John. Like they
Yeah.
actually came to blows.
Yeah.
Um, and so I never know how one of these guys is going to show up in my life.
Yeah. It's definitely been like that for me as well. Clearly the men's group we're there for that purpose,
Yeah,
but just so many more popping up here and there through other avenues. And I like feel myself looking and being not vulnerable when I'm at like, a certain setting where there's tons of guys here. I can talk to them, I can open up, and it doesn't have to be a certain day or time or whatever. Like I could do it. Um, but they are, they're all around us, and I do like, and there's just something I feel more and more lately about just like I can just see, and I'm like, I think I think he wants connection. You know what I mean? It's like, should I go for it? You know, like it's like flirting. It's like flirting. You make
Yeah,
eye
yeah.
contact with a woman in the street, and it's like, oh, attraction. But you know, like with the umbrella, right? It's just like, huh, connection. Just like something's there. What is it that's there? And just exploring that. And I think, you know, I feel pretty intuitive with those things, but I think that a lot of us have more intuition around that stuff than we think we do.
Yeah.
When you mentioned like the range of ages, I know that having older men in my men's group has been amazing. Often they are like in a place in their life where I'm just like, oh man, like one day, you know, hopefully I get there. And I mentioned the blessing part of being a king, and like this, it's very kingly of the elders in the communities to bestow their blessings, their encouragement, to have that, to be told that I'm doing a good job by someone
Mhm,
who like I really respected
mhm, mhm,
multiple times in this journey has been, oh, like rocket fuel, you know, and really something that helps me not just keep going, but like, you know, putting the foot on the gas, really,
mhm.
really going for it. And I do think, and, you know, younger guys for me, like we've had some young guys in my group. I feel like I haven't said it yet, but I'm approaching middle age or something. So so when, you know, we got somebody in mid-20s, we had a few mid-20s. And I guess it's hard for me to discern like what I'm getting from them, like you might be able to do, right? But there is something that is energetic and just like piss and vinegar about it that
Yeah.
certainly supports the group in its own way. And I feel like the exchange of that energy of those blessings is like just I don't know. It's like inside the men's group, it's like we're always kind of doing king's work as well. That's how it feels. You know,
Mhm,
exchanging those blessings, being direct with each other, leading each other sometimes, and knowing when it's time to be led, you know, um, to caring about the overall health of that community. All good stuff. All good stuff that feels like it's a constant practice of like being the king archetype. I'm thinking about the openness piece
mhm.
as well that we were talking about in terms of creating connection, creating friendship and whatnot. And the king chair practice is just as much about openness as like even putting your council together. Because I've seen this go like open-hearted and receiving everything fully, even the more negative feedback, you know, the stuff that you're probably going to want to work on when it's done, the stuff that is hard to hear, the stuff that you may want to reflect or reject, deflect. And I've seen, you know, people, you know, take it all in, but I've seen people just wall up and not take it at all, and there's no point in doing it at that point, you know, because we brought these men around us for the reason of, you can assume safety with us. No one here is trying to hurt you with this. This
Mhm,
is
mhm.
a form of love for you to receive that feedback. So just an important piece of the practice as well is like just remaining in that openness, because there's going to be great stuff and there might be some not so great stuff, and that's the stuff that we're going to do some work with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go.
Right. So let's say Hans is in the king's chair.
And just for everybody who's listening to this, I mean, Leroy and I have spoken a number of times on podcasts, but that's the extent of our relationship. So this is a very limited kind of king's chair experience.
It will be limited, and I'm not going to do any of the I don't see you as a king, because I don't think I'll be able to speak on that accurately. But I want to just drive home that the I don't see you as a king because is just so potent, so potent.
Hmm,
But
hmm.
I'm super happy to love on Hans here. So I will just go for a couple minutes and just give you what I got. So Hans, I see you as a king because of your dedication to men and helping them find happiness and balance in their lives. Hans, I see you as a king because I see the lover in you very clearly. Hans, I see you as a king because of our conversation of man versus bear in the woods, and how within that you stand for the community, stand for safety, standing for the safety and respect of the feminine. Hans, I see you as a king because of all the ways you help people, all the ways you serve your community. Hans, I see you as a king because of your masterful tango skills. Hans, I see you as a king because you got ordained to also continue to stand for love and be there for love and be there for couples. How you're there for couples. I see you as a king because of just, I don't know how to say it, but just how you're there for couples, for marriage, for happy, successful love. Hans, I see you as a king because you spoke about being a grandfather and just the love that I feel that you have for your family. Hans, I see you as a king because of your organization and how you put these podcasts together. You keep on showing up. Hans, I see you as a king because of your social media, your frequency of posting, supporting your business, your project, what you're trying to grow. Hans, I see you as a king because of the interest you had in talking to me and helping me feel, give me your blessings to feel like someone who belongs in the space of helping men be the best they can be. And that was about 2.5 minutes. The real situation, multiple people, maybe a little bit longer. The next question is how you feel receiving some of that.
I have a hard time saying anything right now. It just feels really good. I feel I feel really, yeah, thank you. I feel like I could cry, like really vulnerable. Like
Mm.
I was so I'm writing this book. I may have mentioned it to you. This I call it Apprenticeship to Love,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much every day I write something, and this morning I was writing about just I'm surrounded by so much love in so many different forms, and there was there's a couples therapist who I really like, and they had written a long time ago, but the resistance to love is the causes all the problems. And I could
Mm-hmm.
say that my biggest problem is receiving what's there in front of me, and most often because I want it to look a certain way. So what I was what I've been, wrestling right now because there's a period of silence and darkness, and not darkness bad, just unknown.
Hmm.
And, and I'm wanting something, but what I know is that there's appreciation. What would happen if I just let myself rest in that rather than wanting something else? So, what you gave me and what I experienced was, it's hard sometimes to listen to that much appreciation. I will want to qualify it. I want to basically be defensive about it, be an
Yeah.
asshole about it. And partly because if I go to the place of receiving it and open up, I feel really vulnerable, and I do feel tearful, and I do struggle to know how to do anything except, like the feeling good is hard.
Oh no.
so so those are some words to some of the thoughts that I'm feeling, but mostly it's just thank you, and it feels good to take that in and to feel that kind of vulnerability, and not to notice that I want to close, but to stay open.
Hmm.
And that's a subtle thing, even just talking so much is a way of closing. So I'm going to
Absolutely.
shut up for a moment.
Yo, dude, one of the biggest things that I feel like I've said this lately in building one community, my gaming community, and it's growing a little bit at a time. And I show one of these guys some love, and there's always a, like you said, a qualifier. Like, oh, it was like you did good at that, and you're just like, oh, I was lucky, or just like, oh, I was just doing XYZ. Anyone could have blah blah blah, and I'm just like, yo, except when you've done something good, great, awesome, except when you're a damn badass. And I just want to just shout that out because it's a big challenge for guys, and it's a lot. Is maybe to be seen how you want to be seen. I'll say that for myself. When someone sees me how I see myself, and that's when I'm, in my power. I want to show up in this great way, this powerful way, strong way as a leader. And it's seen, and I'm told I'm doing a good job. Like, goddamn, like that feels just amazing. And it's also a little scary because it's like, oh, I gotta show up now, or they know that I'm capable of being that person. That person has to do some hard things sometimes, and I gotta show up, and they're gonna hold me accountable to that. And it can be scary, but I'm just like, yo, that's it. Life's there. Life really takes place there when you're able to know you want to be something, and people see you as that thing, and you got to keep going. And I remind myself I asked for it. I remind myself I
Mm.
asked for it, and I found just a lot of happiness there. There's a lot of happiness there in those acknowledgments, and I wish for all of us to continue to grow our ability to receive that,
Mm.
to grow familiar with the vulnerability that lies there as well. As I think, a lot of us who are seeking and know we're seeking, like that's part of the discomfort as well. Like it's a good discomfort.
And maybe being in that king place is knowing that we as men resist knowing how great we are, and that we
Mm,
need somebody who will actually still be there when we try to shut that door.
Absolutely. We resist how great we are, and we will go to the most recent example of maybe us failing or not getting the job done, whatever, but forget all the great stuff that happened before that. And that's another really great thing about having your counsel around, right? They're gonna pick you up, they're gonna remind you, help you
Mhm.
get back to that bounce back to that place of remembering your greatness quicker.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm.
Yeah, I enjoy my time with you.
Hey man, me too, me too. It's like it's like a session all of its own, just these conversations, to get some blessings from an elder. Um, you should be charging me shit. Like, and just like and kind of be reminded, like, you know, reminded myself of my greatness as well, just
Mhm.
being here and having these conversations that, I'm having them in some way, shape, or form, but not always like to, the depth at which I'd like to have them. And it's I think a matter of me also continuing to build my counsel, so build it in person, build it outside of just my men's group organization, which is kind of like that's not all, it's not safe at this point, but it's kind of safe. It's kind of been, and it's great. It's going to do its play that role and be that solid counsel. But I, of course, want to see the community, my community that I'm physically in, like, get that medicine too, and feel some sense of responsibility to help bring it there. So
Okay,
this is all great practices for that.
so you're based in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
So there's quite a good tango scene apparently in your city. You can always check that out.
Yeah. True, 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 true.
Um, and I'm on Vancouver Island, and there's a sailing adventure, a fair weather sailing adventure anytime you're in this neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, dude.
Um, you're still involved with Archer Brotherhood?
I am at the moment. I may be taking steps elsewhere of soon, but
Okay.
right now we're rocking and rolling.
Okay, so if anybody's interested in looking for a men's group, you can search Arca. Can you just give us the URL? Do you know what it is?
I think it's
A,
arcabrotherhood.com these
so
days.
that's
Just
ARKA, right?
yep, ARKA Brotherhood.
Brotherhood.com.
Yeah.
So there are listings there of local in-person men's group, but I believe there are also online groups.
Yes.
Um, so for any of us to step into our kingship, we need a council around us, and whether that's in-person guys, which is always best for most of us, or if it's at a distance, but that's where we start. And thank you so much, Leroy. We'll be talking again soon, I hope.
Oh
Good
yeah.
luck in what you do, and definitely send me the link to your wrestling when
Oh
that
yeah.
happens. Okay.
Big time. Thanks, Rev. Appreciate you so much, man. Best of luck.
See ya.
Later.